We are live.
Thank you, Chris.
Mike Steele,
Mike will not be here tonight, John.
Bob Beaudry,
Here.
Linda Noss,
Here.
Doug Holtz,
Here.
Jill Doyle, Joe Plankus.
Here. We have a quorum. Grant Park agreements, April and May for ratification. Matt Trinian?
Yes, good evening, commission members. Matt Trinian, Director of Grand Park here virtually. Because of the missed meeting last month, you have 2 rounds of agreements before you. I did not receive any questions beforehand, but happy to take any questions ahead of the official ratification this evening.
Okay, any commission members have any questions or comments on the 2 months of agreements?
I think I did send an email, but my questions were just on sponsorship agreements, and maybe that's going to be covered in your Q1 report.
Yeah, that'll be covered later, Linda.
Okay.
Okay, do I have a motion for approval of the April Grand Park agreements?
Can you do both?
So moved. I'll second that. Motion by Doug Holtz, second Joe Plankus. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. John, please take the roll.
Bob Beaudry,
Aye.
Linda Noss,
Aye.
Doug Holtz,
Aye.
Joe Plankus.
Aye. Okay, we have a motion for the May Grant Park agreements. I'll move that we'll approve the May Grant Park agreements. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Doug Holtz. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. John, please take the roll.
Joe Plankus,
Aye.
Doug Holtz,
Aye.
Linda Noss,
Aye.
Bob Beaudry.
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next item on the agenda is a Grant Park Q1 report. Matthew?
Yes, again, I really appreciate everybody working with me on my schedule this evening. I am, again, remote as I prepare for my son's preschool graduation, so I appreciate everyone working with us to move this up to the front of the meeting. This is our 2023 first quarter review. As we have done previously, I will give a quick update on a few administrative pieces, and then we'll flip it to William Knox with Legacy Sports Group to go over his portion of the presentation, and then Blake Hibbler will also finish out from a bullpen tournaments perspective. In 2023, in our first quarter, we had a little over 23,000 athletes to the campus, close to 100,000 visitors, and over 660,000 visits to the campus. As we move about, these are park totals, and you'll see a few other breakdowns moving forward. In regards to the financial data, it's imperative just to report on what you're looking at here. So from a revenue perspective, while yes, we will report revenues in the first quarter show a little over 2 million, actual revenues are actually 1.3 million. This is again because of the UMR transfer that took place from an expense standpoint at the last part of the December portion of December, and then the revenues then were reimbursed back into our account in the early part of January. So that's why, again, for Q1, you see that little bit of discrepancy. So that said, revenues for the first quarter, again, were about 1.3 million. As you can see, up about 8.2% over 2022. From our expenses, you'll see a significant increase in our expenses in Q1 from last year to this year. This is solely due to the $1.8 million reinvestment back into the turf project that took place and was completed in Q1. So a great way for us to reinvest those dollars back into the campus. One thing to note here from a financial perspective is great work done by Anna Sperry in our office. She has gone through all of our major events and created a financial tracker for us to be able to identify the revenues and expenses for each event and really help us quantify which events are more successful than others when it comes to the financial output. This takes into effect all revenues and all expenses associated with those events. So just a really neat spreadsheet that allows us to have some inside analytics in regards to how those events are performing throughout our campus. So Anna did a great job there, and it's a tool we use frequently. From a department update perspective, oh, was there a question?
Just one comment, Matt, if you would give us more detail somewhere down the road here, next month or two, about that tracker and show us some figures so we have maybe a better understanding of the kinds of events and what generates the most revenue for you.
Certainly. Be happy to share that with
Okay.
you. From a department update perspective, I won't read all of these, but just highlight a few. In Q1, from an administrative perspective, we host our annual GP Partners Summit where we have several um, tenants and stakeholders and significant partners throughout the industry in at Grand Park. Showcase how 2022 went and then forecasted out what was to expect in 2023, and we collaborate with Hamilton County Tourism on that. From a visitor experience perspective, as you can see, we get a lot of feedback. Not always, it's not always roses. We do get some negative feedback, and our team works hard to clean up those areas to ensure that we're putting our best foot forward. From a grounds perspective, you can see that probably the most significant thing was the installation of the new turf on fields 2 through 5 outside. So really happy that progress went well, and we've played multiple events on them, and they've performed extremely well. From a client services perspective, really big event coming in this July, a new event in the Emoji Games, and Rachel and Anna worked really closely with them to make sure that all things are working well towards an exceptional event there. From a facilities perspective, a lot of great work and maintenance happens in the quote-unquote off months for a lot of areas on the campus, and our facilities team did a great job of painting and prepping all those areas to be ready for our busy season. From our operations team perspective, one thing I'm most proud of is Sean Owens, our operations manager, led the collaboration with the fire department to get all of our staff trained on CPR and AED training. So really want to make sure that we're, again, promoting a safe facility, and that's not just our staff, that's several of our partners that are heavily active on the campus, and I'm really proud of those efforts from Sean to make sure that we have a safe campus for all of our visitors. Those things said, I'm going to flip it to William and then be available for questions after the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Matt. William, are you there?
Yes. Good evening, everyone.
Okay, welcome.
Thank you. I'll go through these slides here, the next couple of slides, and I think Blake will take it from there. The first slide is just a year-over-year view of some of the stats at Grand Park, mostly athletes, visitors, and visits to the campus dating back through 2019, and we're tracking that through 2023. So you'll just see that this is kind of one of those common slides we typically try to include, so you can kind of see visits over the course of time since 2019. Slide number 7 is aligned with the revenues for rental agreements that have been executed. So about a little over $800,000 in revenue has been generated through the first quarter, or contracted through the first quarter. And below are some of the big names that come with those revenues. Some of these events will take place in 23. Some of them are multi-year agreements that will take place in 23 and beyond. But that's just the number for the executed agreements for the first quarter of this year. And as you know, we'll kind of continue to add on this as we go throughout the year, as we show you the year totals at the end of the year. And then looking at marketing on slide number 8, that's just our other slide that we try to provide with updates on marketing efforts throughout the campus. The impressions and the reach are the big numbers that we try to keep up. The post activity is fairly consistent throughout the year. In the spring and summer months, we have a little more to talk about relative to the activity that's happening around campus. So you'll kind of see those numbers increase. But all social media channels have been fairly active throughout this first quarter of the year, which is good for the campus as far as getting their name out there. And then slide number 9 is just sponsorship totals. This is kind of a broad overview of sponsorship for the first quarter. So $31,700 in new sponsor dollars for the quarter. Those are just new sponsors that we brought in. Again, those agreements are probably annual agreements. So this is just a portion of some of those payments that are coming in for these sponsorships. But that represents the new sponsor dollars. And then the 69,200 were renewals within the quarter. And again, below are some of those, the sponsors that we brought on within this first quarter. The West Agency being one of the largest sponsors we brought on this quarter, which was a great partnership that we're just getting to the point where we're getting fully activated. The only other thing that I'll bring up relative to sponsorship, this first quarter has been somewhat of a challenge due to some of the weather conditions outdoor. Many of these sponsors have outdoor assets that we activate by way of diamond signage and or some of our pole banner signage on the field sports side. And we had a few weekends that were pretty windy that kind of pulled a lot of those signs down. So we're now going back through and replacing a lot of those to make sure that we're compliant with all of our sponsors. So you'll see that happening a little bit over the course of the next few weeks. But otherwise, things seem to be trending in a good direction relative to sponsorship opportunities. There are a handful of others that we're working through that obviously are not on this report because they're not executed yet, but hopefully the Q2 report will still show a strong increase in sponsor opportunities as we move forward. So I will pause and allow any questions, or if we'd like to answer questions at the end, I'll turn it over to Blake.
Okay, why don't we have Blake come on, and then we'll go back to Matt to see if there's any questions for Matt. We can then release him from the meeting. Blake, are you there?
Yep, I'm here. Sorry if you hear
Welcome.
the baseball game in the background. Watching the Rocks take on our friendly neighbors up north. So
You need to speak into your mic, Blake.
oh boy. Give me 1 second here and I'll trade out here. Can you hear me better? Or no?
Yep, much better. Thank you.
Okay, awesome. I apologize if you hear any noise in the background. I'm at a baseball game, so imagine that. But
Fancy that.
So kind of taking you through the first slide. This is the number of teams that played in quarter one with us. These numbers are all up. So you're looking at games, teams, athletes, visitors. Room nights is the only one that I think is down at all. We ran into one weather weekend, our only tournament that we really big tournament we tried to execute, we ran into rain. So through quarter one, that's kind of the only problem there. If you want to jump to the second slide, WISI, I want to highlight this. So we have signed a 3-year extension. For those that remember, we did a MOU with the city a couple years ago that expired. We have since signed a 3-year extension with WISI and actualized the contract with the user being with the council and Jake Gilbert and Troy Patton and Scott Fry that we talked through. Originally, we just wanted to actualize that in paper with the actual user of that agreement. So nothing's really changed. We're giving over $100,000 to the WISI travel baseball program and the rec program. So that saves them significantly on field rent and some other things. So their one concern was usage and making sure that number did not go down. And we've kind of actualized the number of hours that they're guaranteed as well. So that should allow them to be at Grand Park for a long time. So it's something we're really excited about. We're going to actually put that out into the Current or the Indy Star to kind of, there's been a lot of press on WISI recently, so we're excited to kind of let the world know about that. Other than that, Alliance Softball, we were really nervous about them moving back a week and extending our weekends. They had over 120 teams signed up through quarter one, so that's huge. Last year was 192, so we think we're still on pace to be around that number. The ABC Championships was a 3-time Economic Impact Award winner. We didn't submit it last year, so we think we'll be a 4th this year. Super Select just took place 2 weekends ago. Sold out. The youth ABCs used to be 1 weekend. We were able to split it into 2 this year, which is huge because it continues to allow teams to play less frequently at Grand Park, making it a more special occurrence. Here at 96%, that's probably gold. We're pretty close to 100% sold out for the summer. So if you want to go to the next slide. We did make some facility improvements. So anybody that's been in parking lot J, this cage is covered in mud throughout the year. We added a concrete curb. That was with the help of the RDC and the city and the capital improvements. Next slide. We redid all the shade structures through one of our vendor partners and us. We were able to actually save quite a bit of money on it. We turned everything to blue. The previous, if you remember, the original shade structures were red, black, green, yellow, white. We were able to replace all of them, make all of them blue. The original blues were the only ones in the park that were still good enough to use. So we think we'll get another, we think those are going to last 20 years just because of the color fade. So that was a big deal for us. Makes the park look a lot cleaner. And then lastly, we've planted trees. So in 10 years, we'll have a hitter's eye. And honestly, the trees around D4 are going to be huge. They're going to protect that building. So, and we did a bunch of trees in the entryways. This is the first of a 5-year project for us to spend $10,000 to $15,000 in trees and landscape throughout the baseball side of the park and softball.
Okay.
And then lastly, and then.
Okay, very good, Blake. Thank you very much. I'm going to go back and see if there's any questions for Matt.
Yep.
As you're working through that, I just want to comment that Blake and his team did a really great job of pushing a lot of those initiatives towards myself and my team, and those are reinvestment dollars that we feel like are strong towards the visitor experience of the campus, and initiatives we fully support. So really excited about we're building back into the facility. It's kind of a process you've seen and heard a few different times, and I'm happy to work with Blake and his team on those projects.
Okay. Any questions for Matt from commission members?
Mine may be for William.
Let's take care of Matt first, because
Okay.
once he's done, then we can let him go. If we have nothing for Matt, we'll let you go. Matt, just one quick question for you and William. Capital plan, how far away are you guys from putting something together then for Grand Park?
So we proposed a plan last year as a part of our budget, and we started walking that line. That's something that we continually work to update. I'd be happy to share where we are currently, especially as I work with the team to write our 24 budget, building in those plans for the next steps. But I'd be happy to meet individually or share at the next meeting, whatever you guys would like to see.
Why don't you bring it back at the next meeting then, Matt, for the commission? That'd be great.
Very good.
Okay, if there's nothing else for Matt, we'll let you go. Have fun. And we'll turn over for questions for William and Blake, commission members.
William, it's Linda. I had a question. I'm looking on these sponsorships and what you reported now in the first quarter. Are the numbers that you're reporting as revenue, is that gross revenue? That's before we take out the percentage we pay to you, to LSG, correct?
Correct.
Correct, okay. And then I was just looking through a lot of the billings that we got this year, and I don't know if this is normal or not, and you can probably answer it, but we're seeing legal billings where they're reviewing a lot of these sponsorship agreements. Is that a normal thing we do with every sponsorship? Are some more complicated than others? What's your experience on that?
Yeah, so we have a template that we use for 90% of the sponsor agreements. There are times where the sponsor will request changes to those agreements, and or they request that the agreements are on their paper as opposed to ours. There are only certain situations where we'll allow that to happen, where we'll put it on their paper, but we do entertain some of their requests for changes to our template agreement. And we always send those to Matt, and he'll send those to legal counsel for review whenever that does arise.
Okay, so for example, when you have a sponsorship like Dick's Sporting Goods and it has to run past the legal once or twice, those fees look like they add up quite a bit when that sponsorship isn't that much money. So it doesn't matter what the amount is, we just are paying whatever the legal fees turn into. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, and it probably would behoove me to get with Matt to understand how that's being processed, because to your point, if we're paying more for legal fees for a review than the sponsor agreement is, then that doesn't make a lot of sense. So I need to make sure I get with Matt and understand what that process looks like. So, but some of them, obviously, we're not going to make a determination if language is adequate or not. And, you know, with the indemnification and things of that nature, and we don't, I would feel more comfortable with your legal looking at it, signing off on it. But I will definitely get with Matt to understand the process so that we can make sure we're not incurring significant legal bills as they go through and review some of these. Some of them we're not going to be able to avoid them. But to your point, if it's a $2,000 sponsorship and we're kind of paying $1,000 in legal fees, we got to make sure it makes sense.
Yeah, well, that's what I wondered if you had taken any time to look at those, because like on our March billings, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 billings, line items that are strictly about sponsorship, but you know, it adds up to quite a bit of money. So I'm just wondering if we've ever looked at that, because we'd like to have a minimum we're making off these sponsorships and keeping in our pockets for revenues.
Might have changed since I've departed the seat. I know previously I was not aware of some of those legal billing items, so I'm not sure if Matt is aware.
Okay,
But if they are being pulled out, then yes, we will make sure we go through that and make sure we're going about it appropriately as we look at some of those.
that'd be great. So I sent an email to, forwarded it to Matt today, sent it to the commissioners and lawyer, but perhaps he can share that with you and you guys can go through this and you can come back to us maybe next month. But some of those bills start adding up into the
That'd be
multiple.
great, William, if you can give us some feedback at our next meeting on what you've discovered and how you propose going forward.
Yeah, I'll get with Matt on that, and we'll report back next month.
Okay.
Would it make sense, though, like in a reporting sense for the commission, and I don't know, maybe John could do it, but if we had something set up where we showed gross sponsorships and net sponsorship revenues received, because that
I
way,
think that probably would be a good summary to have,
Yeah.
Bob, once they evaluate what the situation is. And, and maybe there's a break-even point if you don't have a sponsorship that's, I'm just picking a number, $2,000 or more, then it just doesn't pay.
Right.
Go ahead with it.
it'd be nice to know just what the actual net revenues.
Yeah.
What's
the
our actual
park is
record
getting.
then? And
Yeah,
what's our, as you point out, what's our net?
right, yeah.
And also, it is a tricky thing. A lot of times these sponsorship agreements deal with things like intellectual property and areas where there could be exposure on the part of the park. So we
Right.
certainly try to be efficient, but also some of the sponsorships are just pretty small.
Oh,
So
I-
I don't think we've put a ton of time into these, and we're trying to turn them back and be as light as we can. But, if it's $1,000 sponsorship, maybe that's not worth doing. It's a
Yeah.
fair point.
Yeah.
I just want to be clear, it's a tricky question to, try to be super quick, but also not lead to some kind of exposure
something on
to
the table,
some
yeah.
national
Yeah.
chain that could really be.
Well,
a
and maybe it's
financial pain.
something they need to take into consideration when selling sponsorships, that, hey, we're probably gonna incur some of these expenses. Let's make it make sense before we even pursue it,
Yeah.
Yeah,
point.
I think we just ought to have a breakdown and kind of a plan on stuff like that. And I don't know if you know, William, but like on Portillo's, we got so much in cash and then we got so much in gift certificates. What do we do with the gift certificates?
Matt and his team will utilize those for budgeting kind to offset expenses throughout the year.
Okay. So we got like three in cash and 2,000 in certificates. Okay.
And that's typical. We have a similar relationship with McAllister's where it's not.
Yeah, I thought you had said that before. Yeah.
It's a value in kind, so yeah.
But, you know, considering we're using your time and we're paying you a percentage in your time and expenses and all, maybe we ought to just kind of look at some of these and say, if it's not a minimum of X amount, we're probably not doing well. I know we had
And I think
well over 700 just on that one little one in
Yeah,
legal fees alone.
I'll make sure Matt and I get with Cam to kind of go through what the process looks like when we
Great.
flip some of it back over.
That'd be great.
Yeah, we'll work on that.
Thanks,
Okay,
William.
okay, anything else for William, or can we go to Blake? Blake, any questions for Blake? I guess looks like you can watch your baseball game, Blake.
I think Blake's,
I'm sorry, go ahead,
I
Linda.
got one thing to add that was
He
brought
wanted
up
to
by
add.
council. The Kokomo numbers were between 180 and 200,000 hotel revenue. That was
You're
brought up.
fading away again, Blake.
The Kokomo hotel revenue was between 180,000 and 200,000.
we had asked him that
Okay,
before.
okay, good. Okay, anything else for Blake or William? If not, thank you, fellas, for your report. Appreciate it. Appreciate the follow-up next month. Thank you very much. Okay, I've just got Birch is unable to make it tonight. He had a commitment that came up. He did close his deal on NextCore, so that is a done deal. As part of that process, he has allocated $300,000 to the interest fund, which is the $500,000 that owes the RDC for helping with the financial deal and stuff up front. So that's a little bit more than what I thought. We might get 250, but he's put 300 in there. So now, once the other deal's closed, then he'll have the other 200. And when it's all said and done, then be $500,000 coming to the RDC. Okay.
Good.
Next item is the meeting minutes for our last meeting from March 20th, 2023. Any questions, comments on the minutes? Okay, if not, we had a couple corrections. Kim did very nicely today. Thank her again, Marla, for nice follow-up. Appreciate that. If not, I'm looking for a motion for approval of the minutes.
So moved.
Okay, motion by Doug Holt, so I have a second?
Second.
Go ahead.
Second, Linda Noss.
Second by Linda Noss. All in favor, please signify by saying aye. John, take the roll, please.
Bob Beaudry.
Aye.
Linda Noss.
Aye.
Doug Holtz.
Aye.
Joe Plankus.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the docket for May 15th, and we have copies of invoices. I know there's been some emails with some questions along the way here, so commission members, comments, questions?
I had questions on the invoices for March from Taft, and I didn't mark it up and send it to everybody, but I did mark it up for myself, and some of those are what I previously mentioned to William, but then again, we're getting these with a line item, and Cam was nice enough to respond to me today that what he's putting at the beginning of a line about what TIF it is may not be exactly what TIF it is, and he's, tell me if I'm explaining this wrong, but I think it's kind of between the executive director and the same process we used in the past in determining what accounts these go into.
Yeah,
You want to say that different? I can read your email
I would
if you
maybe
want.
just zoom out another step. I think all I'm trying to do there is say, we know that the revenues that are in these allocation funds can be used to serve or benefit those allocation areas. And when I'm, entering time spent on a series of tasks, I'm annotating that sort of where I think that connection may lie. Just in case it's helpful, that's, like I said, like you mentioned, something that we did retroactively to 2022 to go through and break down entries where we had not made that annotation to say these blocks of time correspond with this allocation area, could be paid out of that allocation fund, just as a legal baseline. I mean, I see it as my job as, if the commission elected to do that, would that be legally improper? And I'm saying anything that you would pay out of that TIF for those services, I don't think it would be legally improper. It's also not, I don't have a vote. I don't make that decision ultimately. I'm just trying to put a helpful note in there so that you have some direction. And Jeremy sees that, and you all see that as the connection I think could exist.
Okay, what I was questioning on here originally was that a lot of these comments, and I appreciate all the comments, you know, and some of them are grouped together, but when we're billing for DSG sponsor agreements or another sponsor agreement, when we are putting in here, you know, talking to, about user agreements, correspondence with IU or Butler or any of these, it seems to me that maybe we should consider that these aren't necessarily TIF expenses, but they're Grand Park Sports Campus expenses. Like if we didn't own that park, would we want to pay this out of our TIF? Because the legal expenses to look at user agreements, sponsorship agreements, when the revenue goes to the sports campus operating, then that's where the expense should normally go. So that's why I had a lot of these marked up, thinking they're not a true TIF expense, even under the description, you know, in Indiana code of what you can use TIF for. It's not even a general operational expense because it relates to that park. And they take revenues from it, and then it costs us some in legal to do those. So I would like to see those related, and it does add up to considerable amounts of money. You know, we're talking about thousands of dollars. So I would like to see this looked at by the executive director, the clerk treasurer's office, and I do appreciate that you put, you know, what TIF allocation, you know, because Grand Park, we say it's Grand Junction, but if it's corporate campus expenses, it's not truly a Grand Junction TIF, from everything that I have read and looked at and understand.
Well, again, I think from a policy standpoint, that's not my call.
Yes, and I understood that from your email, and I appreciated it.
I can take the comment, but I think it's not really for me.
Right.
That's because it's not my decision to make.
Right.
But, and I will say, anything that goes into this matter, and we have a redevelopment commission matter, and that is tied to the engagement that you all approved previously that's subject to the not to exceed on an annual basis. So regardless of the note there relative to specific allocation area, that all goes into that not to exceed number because it's part of that matter.
Okay.
Again, how it's ultimately paid out of
What fund it
operating
goes to in the
revenues
city.
is not my provenance. I don't think. I'm just
No,
saying,
probably
I don't
not.
think it would be improper legally as a baseline if you're to say, well, that serves and benefits the allocation area that's nearby that catches a lot of the commercial activity generated by these events. Do I think that squares with the statute? Yes, I do. Do you have to do it that way? That's not what I'm saying.
Well, there-
I think, you know, I guess what I would suggest, and I don't disagree with your comments on, if it's an operating type expense, seems to me that it should go against the Grand Park budget, because obviously the sponsorships are for Grand Park.
Right.
That's kind of, to me, looks pretty obvious. Why don't we do this, John? You and I get together with Jeremy, and let's set some ground rules for where we think these funds should be charged, or these bills should be charged, if you will. And then we can give Cam some guidance in regards to that so that we short circuit the steps.
Well, and I'll continue to do that in case
Yeah,
it's
you may
helpful.
not
I think
care.
there's an interim step between me and it presented
Yeah.
here. That's
Yeah.
probably where it needs to get caught, yeah.
Yeah,
We could just leave you out of it, right?
yeah.
And I'd be happy
Fine
to
by
give
me.
what I marked up on this copy for March, but we had some like back on February, the last one was 693 for the DSG sponsorship. Well, I don't think that goes out of a TIF fund, it goes out of the sponsorship fund.
I would think that would
Okay.
be the logical place.
And as we're still on claims, the next page I had on Taft, the question I had was, we're now receiving these bills for work that the committee is doing with Taft for the RFP. Do we have yet a letter of agreement, a contract letter, an engagement letter for the RFP? Because we did budget it separately and said there was an agreement or an engagement letter coming, but we haven't seen it yet.
Good question. And you mean the RFP review committee work?
Yeah, the GP-RFP
Okay,
costs.
let me check on that.
Okay.
Because
Yeah, we said in January, we said we'd get it
I
in
re-
February. We didn't meet, didn't have it in March.
I recall the discussion.
Is it coming? Okay.
And I will check.
And-
I'm not the billing attorney for Westfield Matters, so
Yeah.
I don't have direct knowledge of that. Let me check on it.
That's great.
I
And
think
then-
if whoever is responsible, if, whether it goes through you or whatever, Cam, if we can get an email to the commission members.
Yeah.
In the meantime, we don't need to wait till next meeting. That way we know exactly where we're at with having an agreement. If it has to be still acted upon by us, fine, and we'll just need to do what we need to do.
And then when we look at these invoices, and you've detailed them out again, okay? But us, as an RDC, as a commission, we're not really getting reports from this committee to tell us, hey, we're doing this, or working on that, or the other thing. So it's hard for me to look at these 7 line items and even know if this is what we worked on or not. Do you have any more information on that, Joe?
We are not going to
Because,
hear anything.
for example,
from
this
that
is
committee, Linda.
$11,800. I'm like,
We
I
will
don't-
not get anything until they make
Right.
make a recommendation to us and the council on what they're, and maybe
Yeah.
it's no recommendation at all.
Yeah, so
We'll
it's
have to
kind
see.
of-
But those are bills that, as far as I understand, are approved by Jeremy because he's involved in those meetings with that 5-person committee and Taft representatives. So he knows what's going on with that. And if that is the bill that's been approved, then that has been approved by Jeremy as a legitimate bill.
Did we give Jeremy the commission's authority to approve these then? Is that what you're saying?
All I'm saying is Jeremy is going to approve those invoices based on the activities of that committee in the amount of time. I don't know if maybe you have a better way of explaining it, Cam.
Well, I think maybe a more helpful word might be verify. Because no, you have not. Good point. Jeremy
Correct, we have
cannot
not.
actually approve, but
Right.
he can verify the work that goes into them and when those invoices come through him as having participated. So verify might be a better word.
Yeah.
Verify so
Yeah.
that before they get to you,
He
he's
may
verified that
be
that's
able to
happened.
confidentially
I
tell
think I hear
us-
Jeremy on the line.
Yeah, something.
Yeah, I'm here if y'all need me, but yeah. So the answer is I do review and verify the hours that are spent, and then we put those invoices on the docket that are approved is the wrong word, but verified by me that come to you all for approval. Does that make sense?
That's better terminology, Jeremy, I agree.
So I'm here if you guys have any other questions. I've been here the whole time. I'll be on for the duration of the meeting.
Okay, anything else for Jeremy, Linda, in regards to that?
No,
Okay.
those were the two things. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a question, just sparked in my mind, but, I mean, I keep going back to this, but, I mean, all these expenses we've been incurred on, with this exploratory committee and stuff like that, references an RFP, but I don't, really, there was never a resolution or RFP presented to us as a commission, if I'm not mistaken, right? I mean, how can we
That's
approve
not
that?
necessary, Bob.
It's not.
The administration puts out RFPs all the time for different things, and once there's a contract or something to vote on, then it would definitely come to the RDC. The process of going through and doing the analytics, that's something the administration is
So
in
the
charge of.
administration can designate RDC funds to pay for these RFPs, this RFP or any kind of RFP before it's presented to the commission? I mean, that kind of seems a little bit odd. Can you explain that to me? I'm just confused by that.
Yeah, and no, they can't. I mean, those claims have to be presented to you.
Right.
So you vote anytime a claim for an expense is presented to you, whether or not to approve it. The RFP is, as Joe mentioned, a procurement method. That's a way to publicly solicit input to then be presented to you all as the ultimate decision maker. So sign off on the front end as to the RFP is not necessary, because you still have, the ultimate bite at the apple is at the end when that committee says, we want to do this. And that's a
yay or nay decision.
regardless of what they want to do. If the commission
Right.
doesn't say yes, or the council doesn't say yes as to its piece, it doesn't happen. So the expenses are like an ongoing, And I'll check on the engagement, but that would be yeah, we're presenting claims and you have a vote each time as to whether or not to pay those, but it's a way to procure a potential project that ultimately still comes to, to you. This is kind of the front end process.
And, okay, so technically, we approved the budget in March for $100,000 for the RFP. That's the first we ever approved any
correct.
legal expenses for the RFP, although we had some last year, and they're continuing on this year. So I guess that's where we have to point back to. It's kind of like, don't go over the 100,000, because that's all we approved for this process, but we're kind of chewing it up pretty quickly.
True. That is, yeah, that was in the budget and also should be in an engagement
And
in
in
the
a letter
contract
that
to
we're
say,
still
here's the
waiting for. Yes,
expectations.
thank you.
But yeah, that was a not to exceed to get to the point where there's a presentation to you all about here's what the committee thinks makes sense, and then you all have to consider that and engage with that in conversation and cast a vote at the end of the day.
Okay.
And Cam, I'll add a little bit to that. So, the $100,000 that we presented and you approved was for 2023. To say we were chewing it up pretty quickly, I don't know that it's correct. I think there's roughly $24,000, maybe. I don't even know if it's that much this year that's been spent on the
It's
RFP.
close.
The heavy expense that you saw on, and Linda, I responded to your email and explained that was early on last year in 2022 that ultimately got invoiced, but it didn't get paid until this year, so it impacted the budgets. I'm not concerned with the amount of money that we have in the current budget for the RFP process, given where we are. I mean, unfortunately, I'm bound by an NDA that I can't speak too awful much about it, but I think we're okay from a legal expense. So.
Okay. We
Okay.
asked that before we voted that budget.
Chewing it up real quick, yeah. We're not chewing it up as quickly as it seems.
Okay.
There's a year and a half's worth of work in what we've spent so far.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy. Okay, if there are no further questions.
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm really surprised. I appreciate Linda bringing this to our attention, these expenses. We've had TIF districts for over 10 years, and I'm surprised that we are now looking at creating a procedure or a policy for the allocation of expenses for these TIF districts. This should have been something that was handled in the clerk's office over 10 years ago. So as we look at the expenses and the revenues and so forth for these TIF districts, we have to question how accurate have they been for the last 10 years, 10 plus years. So I'm not saying we should go back over a 10-year period and look at those expenses, but I'm wondering, right now it's May, we're looking at March, April expenses. Can we go back for the calendar year of 2023 and reallocate these expenses so at least in the calendar year 2023, we have an accurate accounting of revenues and expenses? To say, and Linda brings up a good point, I give her credit for that, but that's embarrassing, to be very honest, to have a misallocation of expenses. So my question is, can we go back and correct 2023?
Can I say something to that? Because until last fall, we didn't even have the breakdowns of what these legal expenses were for. Remember when we got the sheet and it was
Yeah.
all colored?
Yeah, I agree with you.
Now we're getting them, and I'm like, we need to get these
Yeah.
in the correct account.
Yeah, so at least,
in the right box.
let's do that for 2023.
Yeah.
John?
So, to
And
be
I'll jump
clear,
in there, for John. John, if you don't mind, I'll try.
yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
And Doug and Linda, you're exactly right. And this whole thing is to try to make it all equitable. In the past, all legal expenses were paid by the city administration.
That's right.
Yeah.
Out of the legal budget. We are now trying to distribute these to the appropriate places. Seems to be a little bit painful, but we're going to get there.
Yeah.
There will be some adjustments after we get this resolution passed that's coming up, passed or not passed, I guess. So the whole scope of this effort is to try to put all the expenses where they belong in the different economic development areas that generate the actual cost.
Okay.
And to answer your question, Doug, yes, the whole goal is to put everything where it belongs, adjust the different accounts that have already spent dollars to the appropriate legal line, so that way moving forward, we can appropriately budget for the costs of each individual EDA so that every single piece is paying its own way, with the idea that the taxpayers on the back end for the property, the residential property taxpayers aren't carrying the cost of the TIF services. The whole goal, the whole plan.
Okay.
I agree, Jeremy, and remember,
Great.
it took us until 2019 to where we could get the wages for Grand Park under the sports operating campus budget too, because there weren't funds. So I think what you said is right. I think what Doug said is right, and let's get this done.
Okay, thank you, Jeremy.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. That's an excellent description. Okay,
You're welcome.
thank you.
And I would only clarify that the narrative always existed. We typically don't send that to public clients because then it's a public document. And we've actually, like, not me personally, but as a firm firsthand, we've witnessed that then be used in litigation in a way that was harmful to the client's position. So the only reason that it wasn't attached to begin with is to avoid that scenario. There are other ways that we can share it, and we also then went back through and coded things, which we had not done before, to connect the allocation areas. But that's just a protocol for the protection of the unit. There was always description of the services that existed. I just want to be clear about that. It wasn't.
Okay, well,
Okay.
I think it may help you if you can break out, like, work on user agreements, work on sponsorship agreements, and put those to the campus operating versus put them to a TIF fund. It'll help. You're
Well, again,
annotating them also.
I'll write them down as I do. Where they go is not up to me.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, Kim. Okay, with all that background and how they're working on carrying it forward, I think the next task is to hopefully approve these invoices for the docket. And as we get a better handle on where it actually is going to go, there'll probably be some additional work involved, certainly to shift it to the right account numbers. But in the meantime, I'm looking for a motion for approval of the claims for this month.
So moved.
Okay, do I have a second? Okay, I'll second the motion. Motion by Doug Holtz, second by Joe Plankus. John, please take the roll.
Doug Holtz,
Yes.
Linda Knopf,
Yes,
Bob Beaudry,
Yes.
Joe Plankus.
Yes, motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is Resolution 04-2023 Appropriation/Budget Ratification. Cam, would you like to explain this one? This is one you wrote up for us.
This is what'd you say? I missed the last part.
I'm sorry,
Okay.
Resolution
Yes.
2023.
Yes, this just appropriates available cash on hand in the allocation areas for the payment of services. That's still subject to contracts or engagements, still subject to the budget, just makes that available. Those funds, I think that's consistent with statute anyway, but for the sake of having a local document that appropriates them, and then ratifies the 2023 budget that was approved in, I forget the month.
March.
I don't know what month it is anymore. March? Yes. Ratifies that budget approved in March, just to clarify which one should apply for 2023.
And I would add that if you do choose to move forward with this, Marla and I have been working with Jeremy on if we probably want to make a statement in the approval of the resolution that on Fund 328, we're going to re-look at the actual numbers on this document, so those could change. We want to
That's the
visit.
one I asked you about today.
Well, no, this is 328 is, no,
Oh, the
this-
other, okay, not the Wheeler?
yeah, it is Wheeler,
Wheeler-
but this
Wheeler
is
Landing.
for the fund numbers.
Okay.
The actual identifiers that we
Yes.
typed in.
Okay,
So we're going to confirm that. Although I believe what, these are correct, we're just going to validate that. Because we are talking about two different types of activity in this report.
so you want it in the motion,
Yes,
is what
thank
you're
you.
saying. Thank you. And then, oh, I'm sorry, I had a question on, because Cam, at the January meeting, you said we could look into a general fund. And then I brought up to the council that there's still that option, when you give abatements, you could, there's that law that says you can take $100,000, or you can take a percentage of the abatement and of what those taxes would have been, and you can put it towards one thing is an RDC fund. And then it helps to support, development where we don't have a district isn't making money. So are we going to at some point discuss a general fund? Are you thinking this is for the 2024 budget, or, and this is what we're gonna do for now?
I agree with your assessment. That's an available tool. It's not something I've been charged with drafting up or putting in place. It's certainly a conversation we had with the city's economic development director that, most of those, all the abatements are processed through CAI and the council, et cetera.
The council, yes.
So grafting on that kind of a fee, and I've got clients that do that, and it can be a good source of funds. But that's, again, I agree that that's a potential tool, a potential fund out there, but I don't know that it's up to me as to whether we enact that now or in
Linda,
the
let
future.
me talk with Jeremy, I think it is a 24 budget thing, but let me confirm that
Yeah.
with Jeremy, okay?
Because this is setting up for 2023, correct?
Yeah, this is 2023 budget. So let me,
Okay.
I'll get with him on that.
All right, just didn't want to lose that, because we talked about it in January, it's May already, okay.
Now, John, should we hold back 328 for the next meeting, or approve it with the necessary corrections to be made?
A little bit.
Yep, Jeremy?
Okay.
Yeah, so Linda, are you asking for the general fund, so the city council to allocate dollars for operating through the RDC? Is that your request?
Yes, we discussed it in January, and Cam made some comments too, yeah.
Okay.
But
Yeah,
we're
we
not,
still
but we're
haven't
not
determined
including
where-
that in this resolution for 2023. So that's what I'm asking, are we pushing that to 2024?
I would agree, it's,
No, it is not included in 2023. I've still never had a single counselor ask for this to happen in 2024. But I'll commit to talking to all of them if they want to take operating dollars and put it toward the different, EDAs or the RDC, I guess, to have some sort of operating fund. I will commit to talking to that. That's not what we're doing today. I think what we are actually, and the change that we're actually talking about is that we are simply switching an appropriation number in the Wheeler Landing TIF from 370 to 328. Is that what I understand, John?
That's correct. But again, Jeremy, after re-looking at this, I think I have the right numbers, but I'm going to confirm that with Jim Treat and Nathan Fox. But I believe the way that we can move forward is just to make that statement.
In the motion.
Yes.
Okay.
and let me,
Yeah, make the statement in the motion.
okay, let me further clarify 2 points. One, no, that's not in here. There's not some general
Right.
Operating fund. That's not part of what this resolution does.
Right.
I think what we talked about was some other source of funds that may be under the purview of the council, like other general city revenues. Could the city council say, we're gonna appropriate this amount of funds for operating? Yes, they could. I've not been asked to work on something, and it sounds like Jeremy hasn't had a push for that from a councilor for this year or next. But the abatement fee question is a separate question also. That would be, you know, something that would go into the approvals of abatements moving forward. You can charge someone a fee. That also would be something that the council would need to, you know, work with Kai to enact, and then that fee is paid through the treasurer as part of their, you know, annual tax bill as they come up. So that's, there's some steps to getting that in place. Can be done, but all of that can be done. But I've not had somebody say, hey, we're doing this, and it's not in this resolution.
Understood that.
Okay. With that being said, do I have a motion for approval of Resolution 04-2023?
Linda Nass, I move to approve Resolution 04-2023 with the review of account 328 Wheeler Landing TIF with the RDC Executive Director and the Clerk Treasurer's Office, and to consider possible changes or verification of those account numbers.
Okay, I will second that motion. John, please take the roll.
Linda Nass,
Aye.
Bob Beaudry,
Aye.
Doug Holtz,
Aye.
Joe Plankus.
Aye. Motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much. Next item on the agenda is the Q1 RDC report. John Rogers.
I sent this out last week, and I received a few questions. I think I've covered most of those. Are there any additional questions or questions that I haven't covered so far in the email responses?
Oh.
Bob, do you have anything on that? Linda?
I'd asked my questions about those different amounts.
They get answered for you?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
Yep.
we'll get it straight.
Okay, Doug, anything on that? Okay, with that in mind, John? Any comments or questions for John on an Exhibit A report, which is really attached to the resolution, but that's the,
Yeah, yeah.
John provided us, and one of the things John and I worked on is really historical data more than anything, is up in the top box, we asked, for instance, description, Eastside TIF was created in 2007, started receiving revenue in 2008. I think it's important for us to understand, you know, how far back this goes. You know, it may be getting to the point where, you know, if we were a few years down the road, it's ready to expire, and those kinds of things. I think it's important information to help track with the numbers when the thing got started and so on. So, you know, obviously it's affected by how much investment takes place in that district and so on and so forth. But I thought that was a good start to, you know, give us a little bit more information on each of the individual TIF funds. So any questions for John from commission members? I think we're good on that. Okay. Any additional, thank you very much, John. Nice work. Any additional business before the commission? Cam, John, anything else we have? Nothing? Okay.
I have nothing.
Okay, very good. I have a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Okay, Doug Holtz. I'll second that motion. All in favor, please signify by voice vote. Aye.
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 Thank you very much. Don't leave, because I think Marla's got stuff for us to sign. Do you, Marla? I thought so.
You're too softly spoken, Bob. You gotta.